Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, this is Alan Eisenberg, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. This is a very special episode for me because I have Kirk Smalley with me. And Kirk Smalley is one of the founders of Stand for the Silent, which is a movement for helping with the cause of bullying. But more important, he's the father of Ty, and Ty Smalley, almost to the day, took his life due to bullying 6 years ago. And Kirk was featured in the movie Bully by Lee Hirsch, which I'm a huge fan of, if only because it tells the truth. It tells what's still going on today. And as Kirk would tell you, I think he just read my book, I wrote about these things years before they showed up in a movie in 2013. So I'd like to introduce you to Kirk Smalley and welcome him to the show. Welcome, Kirk.
Thank you.
So I know this is a heavy subject, and I never make light of it. But you know, from your side, I know it started with the death of your son. What motivated you? A lot of people would sort of fall apart at that point or not want to get involved. What motivated you and your wife to really get involved in this cause?
Really, Alan, it was a promise. 1 month and 7 days after we lost Ty, after he killed himself, it was actually on Father's Day, and I made a promise to my boy that I would stop bullying in this world for him. And to this day, I have never broken a promise to my son, and I'm not going to start now. Is that doable? That I am able to keep that promise? I really, truly don't think so. But at the same time, I'm not willing to give up on that promise until my last breath to try and keep that.
And I think that's the strength is, as I say, I was telling you before we started, my group is called Bullying Recovery, because as much as I'd love to believe, and I've interviewed people who say, bullying is going to end in our lifetime. I think it's been around forever, and I think it's going to continue to be around. It's just the nature of animals and humans, and I don't know why. I know that for me, I was a sensitive, and I still am. I'm what I call an empathic person, and maybe you notice things in your son, like that he had empathy or felt a lot, or I know his size. You talked about him being small, but that those are, as I say, no reasons for people to do things to others and make them feel less of a person. And
Sure.
I have a question just that has been something as I watched the movie Bully and heard from you. I don't know that I really felt that when Ty died, how did you cope as a parent? Like, what were the things that you said, okay, I can either wallow in this or what happened, or I'm going to give strength to myself, because obviously you chose a strong thing, which I found actually to be hard for me until I came to grips with it, which was to face it. This is what happened, and I'm going to go headlong into it. And actually, when I did that as a victim, it caused me further damage until I learned to cope. How did you cope?
My wife was actually a real key part of that. She lost her baby, and my family has always been the kind of, I was always raised to, you don't ask for help from anyone, you do things yourself. You stand on your own 2 feet, and you protect and take care of the people that you love, and family is everything. And my wife she fell apart.
Yeah.
Life was pretty much over in her eyes and in her heart, and to be able to take care of her and pull her from that darkest place that she'd ever been. I had to be as strong as I could possibly be and just do what I could do. And then, as the ball kind of got rolling and we did some research on statistics of youth suicide and bullying, we started learning so much that most people truly don't know. Yeah. And we finally realized how bad this had actually gotten in our society and our world, and decided that, we couldn't let another mom, another dad live the nightmare that we live every single day without our boy. Yeah. Ty would be graduating from high school this year. He killed himself on May 13th, 2010. He was 11. He was a week from getting out of school before he died. And, we get messages from these kids that we go and speak to, Alan, literally by the hundreds and thousands. We'll get Facebook messages and emails and messages on Twitter that say, "You saved my life." Yeah. I was one of those kids that actually had a plan on how I would take my own life until I heard you speak, and now I'm not going to do that, I promise, and I'm going to help you make it stop. I want to do everything I can to make that stop. The statistics in our world they're staggering. Yeah. I have a list of over 55,000 children in America that have taken their own lives due to bullying in the last 7.5 years. And if you do the math, that comes to almost 22 a day. Yeah. That's almost one every hour. I got contacted from a family down in Houston that just lost their 13-year-old daughter a week ago to the same thing. I met a family in Iowa last week that lost their 14-year-old daughter to the same thing. And it's just happening every single day, over and over and over. And we've got to do everything we can to make it stop. Some of the other statistics that we've learned over the years, 1 out of 4 children in America will actually have a plan on how they would take their own life before they graduate from high school.
Yeah, that statistic just showed up the other day, and I was like, that blows your mind, doesn't it? It's crazy.
It's unreal, and we get messages from those kids that have that plan, and that is our main motivation, that we help them get through this and make them realize that they aren't alone. They're not the only ones that have ever felt that way, and that we can talk it out. We don't have to act it out. We can talk about it, and we can make it stop.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, suicide has become the second leading cause of death in our young people in America, ages 10 to 24 years old right now. It's second only to car wrecks. Yep. And there's always been a stigma attached to suicide. You don't hear about it in the news every single day because a lot of families don't come forward and speak about it. There's a certain stigma that's always been attached to it. If someone in your family takes their own life, then there must be something wrong with those folks. And so, it tends to be where people don't come forward and speak as often and speak up about it as often. And we got to make that stop, Yeah. I've had so many different people tell me, well, there has to be a mental illness involved if someone takes their own life. And that I don't believe that. Our son was always smiling and happy. And I've met over 500 parents that have lost their children to suicide because of being bullied, and they all tell me the exact same thing. There are very, very few of them that will say, yes, there possibly was some mental illness that caused this. Yeah.
Well, there's what people, as we get older, what we fail to understand is how quick a decision can be made when you're young. Things are either omnipotent or you're nothing. And when you feel like you're nothing, that's when, it's so easy to make that decision. But we forget that. We think, we all have, good days and bad days and all sorts of feelings. But when you're a youth and when you're going through puberty or those, really tough years for boys, which your son was in, and just by the way, your son and my son are the exact same age, and so, when you're sitting there talking about him graduating, and here I am, doing all this stuff, and it's like, you have to remember, and I do remind my son quite often, that there are people that didn't, make it. And, luckily because of our religion of being Jewish, he had to do something when he was 13, where he found a Holocaust victim who didn't survive, and he had to do a ceremony for that child. And I think that was something where he learned, this happened, not every kid gets to grow up. And what we have to do is we have to represent, that. And that's why I think what you're doing is so honorable, because it's not easy. It's not easy for me to tell people that, I don't consider myself mentally ill. I consider that I had a mental break. I always tell people I had a mental break when I had to come to terms with the bullying that happened to me as a youth. But I wasn't mentally ill. It was like breaking your bone. I say it's like breaking your bone. When you first break your bone, what are they going to do? Well, they'll give you drugs, for the pain, because that's all you're thinking about. And then when that's done and you're sitting there with the cast, you're just ruminating about getting better, and then you have to actually get better, and work. And there's a lot to that. There's a lot, what I say is that, these things can just happen. It's not something that you carry forever. And so, when children make a decision, especially at the ages, we're talking about, I look back at my children when they were 11, and you read my book. So I'm very honest about what I was doing when I was 11 and 12, which was some very bad behavior, totally against how I felt, in order to try to just get people to like me, right? Just do that. And what those decisions you make, are not what you make as adults. And so I guess, what I'm curious about is so you really didn't notice that there was anything going on in the last few months of his life, other than you knew that there was some bullying going on, I guess, in his life, right?
That's correct. And, my wife Laura worked at the school that Ty went to, actually. Right. She was in the office almost every single day, either in person or she'd call him and tell him, this kid won't leave him alone. He's dumped chocolate milk on his head. He's shoved him into trash cans and crammed him into lockers. And she literally was in the office almost every single day trying to get the administrators to do something about it and get this kid to leave Ty alone. But, it never really affected him as far as, we had no inkling of an idea that he had ever considered hurting himself, that he had ever considered taking his own life. I think it was very more of an impulsive thing. What happened the day that Ty passed, he was in the gymnasium with his friend, waiting for class to start, and this kid came up and pushed him from behind, and Ty turned around and pushed him back. And Alan, it's always the second guy that gets caught in something like that. The disturbance draws the teacher's eye, and they happen to look over, and then they see that second guy take the swing, and that's what happened to Ty. And he was suspended for 3 days, and I think that broke his heart. He all his life, his mama and I had tried to tell him, son, you have to stand up for yourself. You have to, you have to let them know that they can't do this to you. And the one time he finally found the courage to do that, he was punished for it.
Well, and that's the real thing that just happened to me too. It's this victimization, double victimization of the victim. It's not not only like what for me, and you read my story, so right. I didn't want to fight. I got picked on. Then I'm the one at the counselor's office. I'm the one who's going through, what's going on? Why is everyone picking on you? Well, there must be something wrong with me, right?
Right.
And these are the adults. So now I lose my trust of adults.
Right.
And then, I can't even tell you when I was watching the movie Bully, and I don't know if you were affected by this part, where the administrator pulls those kids in from the door who were fighting, and she wants them to shake hands.
Shake hands.
The bully victim's like, I'm not gonna shake his hand. He, does this, and she's admonishing him. She's like, if you don't do this, you're
just as bad, right?
Yeah, and it's like the kid's already feeling terrible, and that happened.
That vice principal, the assistant principal in the movie that you're talking about, was actually promoted to a full principal position in another school.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of things that we're fighting, is adults don't realize how much this is impacting kids. They think so many times the words boys will be boys and kids will be kids. Bullying is just a rite of childhood passage. Those are all things that I've had to hear from Ty's school, and that his mama had to hear from Ty's school. And it's not true. We don't, they say that it's something that every kid has to go through. That's not the case. We don't have to go through that. Why? It's a choice that people make to treat others that way. And here's my thing. You talked earlier about you touched a little bit on why kids are kind of doing this type of behavior. We've raised a couple of generations now in our world of kids that don't know what empathy even means. They are desensitized. I blame a lot of that on the movies, the media.
Oh, yeah.
You can turn almost any television channel on. It doesn't even have to be cable anymore, and watch somebody get an arm ripped off or a leg ripped off or blood squirting. The cartoons that they watch, even, Alan, you look at the one called South Park. There's a little boy named Kenny in South Park, and he dies in every single episode, and he gets to come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And what right there is that teaching our children? That death isn't real, that we get to come back tomorrow.
And more than that, they now have, the thing that I know you and I didn't grow up with is they can hide behind the computer. My son is always on the computer and playing games where, who knows who's in the rooms with him. And they can say whatever they want to him. They can call him any name they want. They can hide behind a fake identity. And you can't even know, who is after you. That's scary. That's
I've actually been to schools where first graders had smartphones, and they were good on them. They knew how to use them.
Yeah.
And they would. Some of these kids they can take a picture while they're walking down the hallway or in the locker room of another child, and they can do a little Photoshop work on that picture and make it look like that other kid is doing anything they want them to do.
Yeah.
And then they can build a fake Facebook account. They can post that picture online, and they can ruin someone's life with just the click of a button. And they think that, okay, maybe I got to feeling bad about doing that. I'll just delete it. But it's not gone. It's out there. Somebody's seen it. Somebody's shared it. Somebody's saved it. It's always going to be there, And
that's like, the whole issue with, sexting or any of that. All of these bad behaviors, they just are going to be there forever. You're never going to get them. And when you're a kid, you're not thinking about that. You're not at all aware that what you're doing right now is now forever.
That's right.
God knows if anybody took a picture of anything I did when I was a kid, I don't even think I'd hold a job anymore. It's just, bad behavior was my middle name.
There you go.
And I did it mainly just to be liked. It was so against who I was. And at the point, as you read, I chose a weapon versus taking my own life. And I just couldn't even tolerate it anymore. But, I hate to go to a commercial on that note, but I need to take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and I just love to talk to you more about, what we're doing and how we can improve society. What are you doing with Stand for the Silent that, you feel like we're starting to see a difference? So
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
This is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy University. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Deep in a dark hole in the recesses of his mind, Alan tried to bury all the bad memories of the bullying that happened to him. But memories can't be buried, and he would be haunted by his youth and these memories for a very long time to come. Then he must confront and come to terms with his own youth and the things that happened to him. Find out what Alan didn't want to remember. Read A Ladder in the Dark, My Journey from Bullying to Self-Acceptance. Available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most major book retail outlets. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy University. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm talking with Kirk Smalley. And Kirk, again, to remind you, was a father in the movie Bully, who had lost his son Ty now almost to the day 6 years ago. On Friday the 13th of this month, it will be 6 years. So Kirk, thank you again for being on the show at I know what is a difficult time, but also, because we want to make a difference. We want to make people realize that, these things happen. And as you said, the numbers are staggering. You're not alone. I'm not alone in how I felt and the things that happened to me. So how do we move forward? How do we take that tragedy and turn it into something positive? How have you felt that's something that you've done?
Alan, one of the things that we've done has been to realize that spreading awareness is actually key. Far too often adults, people your age, my age, that we grew up without the internet, we really don't, many parents don't really take into account how bad bullying has actually become, especially with the cyber end of things. They don't realize how easy it is for a kid to change their identity online and pick on somebody relentlessly, ruin their life. And so awareness is one of the main things that I feel that is just real key in helping prevent bullying, and getting the bystanders involved.
Yeah.
Laura, there are more bystanders than there are bullies, and there's more bystanders than there are victims. And it's a proven fact. There's a statistic that says that 95% of the time, if one person will stand up and say something about it, bullying will stop within 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And, we have to be that one person. Laura and I have spent the last 5.5 years traveling all over this world. We have talked. I've only started keeping track of how many schools we've gone to in about the last 3.5 years. And in 3.5 years, we have talked to a little over 1,180 schools. And we have talked to a little over 1,280,000 kids in that time frame.
Wow.
And we have chapters of Stand for the Silent started in schools and communities all over the country. We have them in 39 states and in 16 different countries right now. And we're getting people involved, and that's very, very important that we keep that in front of the kids in our communities, and not only them, but in front of the parents, and educate them on the devastation that bullying can and does cause. Kids don't learn this stuff just on their own. They learn it from watching adults, and that's the sad part. You know, they're surrounded by bullying everywhere they look. You look in our politicians right now. You know, they bully each other relentlessly on television and in print. You look at our pro sports. We have bullies all over in them, you know, that are we have bullying in our workplace. Of course it's going to be in our schools and even in our homes because they're surrounded by it. They see it everywhere they look, and they think that makes it acceptable, you know.
Yeah, and we have another side, which is the bully. I mean, I think it's hard to you know, look at both sides for us because, you know, we've both been victims of the effects of bullying. But that bully isn't just bullying for no reason. This is the other study is something's going on there, you know, whether they're being ignored at home and they just want attention or whether they're actually being abused at home. They've actually put up, you know, statistically, you know, what the victims feel in terms of self-esteem and all that and what the bullies feel, and it's pretty much 1-to-1. And that's the scary part is that, you know, we don't take into account that there's an abuse going on and you know, luckily now there's a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I spent years saying that because I work in D.C., so I actually work in the PTSD field developing help for soldiers. And I'm like, that's me. You know, that same thing they're feeling, that's what I'm feeling. You know, I have fight or flight problems. I'm scared I'm going to be attacked all the time. I'm feeling this way all the time. And to finally get someone to admit that's the diagnosis for youth abuse, you know, and youth abuse of any type, whether you're abused at home or you're abused at school or in the community, the resulting factor is the same. And then I know you and I know the statistics. You know, a person who's a serial bully has a 60% greater chance of going to jail, committing a crime and going to jail, and then a 40% chance of that 60% of doing it twice. And that's the end of their career. That's the end of their ability to get a decent job. You know.
You know, it's odd that you say that. I work with a lot of law enforcement agencies doing what I do. A lot of times it's the county sheriff's office or the local police department will bring us in and have us do a presentation at various schools in their communities or even an open to the public presentation, you know, to help educate. And what that tells me is that, you know, the law enforcement agencies are realizing that if we can stop this at a younger age, you know, then that actually makes their job a lot easier down the road. You know, they don't have as many people that have grown up like that. You know, bullying, I feel like, you know, you mentioned earlier that, you know, about the bully, how they feel. I have been on the receiving end of it, not just being a victim of bullying. I think we all have at one time or another either A, been a victim of bullying, or B, actually been the bully too.
Sure.
If nothing else, we stood by and we watched it happen to someone else and we didn't stand up and say something about it and help make it stop. But at the same time, doing what I do on a daily basis, I get contacted by a lot of the bullies. You know, they tell me, I never realized that what I did could cause something like what happened to your son, and I'm sorry, and I want to help make this stop, and I'm going to change. I'm going to try my hardest to change. But you know, Alan, I tend to believe that a lot of times bullies tend to come from bullies.
Yeah. I mean, I totally believe that.
It's a learned behavior. We're not born to hate. Hatred is something that we learn. We learn it from the people around us. And I kind of call it my kick the dog theory. And, you know, I get bullied at work from my boss, and I come home and I take it out on my wife and my kid. And then my kid walks outside and he kicks the dog because that's all he can do is pass that pain down to someone below him.
I mean, that's actually got a name in the psychology field, and that's exactly the behavior I was doing, which is called displaced aggression. So
Sure.
you can't take, you know, particularly like in work, obviously, you can't take out your aggression on your boss. But, you know, if someone's beating me up every day and I go home to my loving parents who aren't going to, you know, kick me out of the house, that's who I have. And I did things to my dog, too. I mean, I did, you know, kick the dog things. And And I was a nasty, angry youth, and I took it out on the people who loved me the most. And then when I got married, I still continued. My wife will tell you. And then I coined the term that, perceived threat syndrome. These bullies break your fight or flight to the point where you can't tell a threat from a non-threat. Someone says something negative to you or just in passing, and you take it as a threat. And that's what I was doing. And I was like, why am I doing this? And early on, I was buying these books about, anger. One of them called, it's not me, because I knew, I'm like, why am I doing this? And I couldn't put it together quite yet. But that's what we do.
Part of the healing process or something that, we can do to help, ourselves is to help others.
Yep.
I feel very strongly that, by what Laura and I do every day, and I'm going to be honest with you, Alan, what I do on a daily basis is probably the toughest thing that I've ever faced in my life. I go and I speak to schools and communities I tell them what happened to Ty. I relive the day that I got the phone call while I was at work from my wife that my son had shot himself in our bedroom floor. Every single day, 2 and 3 and 4 times a day. It's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
But by doing that, I'm saving babies' lives because I get those messages that tell me I am. And knowing that I can keep one of them here and make them realize that they belong, that they are somebody. And that's our main thing. On our website store, we have these little bracelets that say, I am somebody. And I give them away at the schools that I go to by the thousands. Letting them know that they matter, that they have a right to be here, they have a right to be exactly who they are, and that we love the somebody that they are just the way they are. And that is so crucial and critical to let these kids know that they're not alone and that they do matter.
And that they're not oddballs. What's sad is, we've had several friends whose children had Asperger's syndrome, which is now classified on the autism scale, but it's very minor. But they don't have social skills. They lose, and of course they're a victim, or you look different and you're a victim, and people, kids are just so sensitive to these things. And what I say today, I have a strong belief that I'm happy with who I am. I am a good person and I'm a bad person, and I don't mean that in a negative. We're all yin yang.
Right.
We all have these traits. We do. I'm empathetic and I have a strong empathy for things, but that creates a negative part as well that I really can't deal with a lot of input at the same time because it overwhelms me and things like that. So it's interesting, I think, that you even talk about, the importance of people and children realizing that it's fine to be who they are. And the problem is that, they don't yet realize that, it's the differences that make us strong. But when you're young, people don't see that yet. Kids
Sure.
don't see that yet. And of course, what bothers me is that the school administration is not teaching that. We don't teach empathy. We don't teach sympathy. We don't teach acceptance of people who are different. And
part of that, though, I feel is a lot of it can be found fault with our government.
Yeah.
One of the things that really irritates me, I have talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of school counselors, and these people are passionate about what they do. They went to school for years and years to learn how to be a school counselor and help kids with their problems. But yet, right now in America, we have government tests that we require school kids to take. And you know who always ends up having to be the administrator of those tests?
Yeah, those
The school counselors. And so they're required to spend most of their time working on that type of thing because of cuts in education budgets and such, that they're not even hardly allowed time to counsel our kids, you know. And part of that, I feel like if they want our kids to have to take government tests in our schools, then they need to, bring in people that can administer those tests without, taking up the school counselor's time to do so,
Well, we also know, there's another movie out there, another documentary that I think fits very well with bully, which is called Waiting for Superman, which is about the problems in the school systems and why these people are sort of the way they are. It's a bureaucratic nightmare in there, and they actually do treat the kids differently depending on, the ones who are troublemakers versus the ones who aren't, and they'll classify a troublemaker as a kid who's constantly getting bullied because they're constantly having to deal with him.
Sure.
And that's the big part of the problem is they've got to see that, going back to what you were saying about police, the reason police like what you're doing is because when people punch each other as adults, we call that assault. So if we could stop it as youth, it's not acceptable when you're a kid. It's still assault.
That's right.
But they let them get away with it. And then, it's like you said, they grow up to do these things. And I have a brother-in-law, and he grew up in a very bullied household where his dad and his uncles would have him and his cousins fist fight each other. And then whoever won that would have to take on one of the adults.
Wow.
He tells these stories, and I'm sure you've heard stories like when I wrote my stories down, I thought, wow, they're bad. And then people sent me stories, about being raped in locker rooms and sodomized and terrible things happening. And this one woman who was a grandmother, she said no one would ever know her. She tends to her garden and all this, and she took the bully and she poured gasoline all over his car and lit it on fire, and to this day nobody knows she did it, but she lives with that.
Right.
She's a 65-year-old grandmother, just sitting on the street. So you're not going to see it, and that's the other thing that I think you and I both know. My parents didn't know what was happening to me. I stopped trusting them when I was 7, 8 years old. And so I wasn't going to tell them because adults had already let me down.
Right.
And, that's the thing that personally I want to try to address is to stop letting adults let you down. I was lucky that I had some mentors that picked me back up and gave me trust back, because if I didn't, I don't want to think about the things that I would have done, because you live with it every day.
Yes, sir.
So I'm sorry to say we're coming to the end, but I have one last question for you, and then I want you to be able to talk about how people can get in touch with the Stand for the Silent movement, become a part of it. I'd love to be a part of it if you'd have me, at some point, and would love to help. I think what you're doing is great. But I have a difficult question for you, and it's a question I do ask on the show because I think it's important for us to think, okay, we're adults now, and if we look back, if you could go back and tell Ty one thing when he was hurting, and maybe you've thought about this before, what would be that one thing that you'd want to tell him?
You told me that you were going to ask me this, and I've got so much I need to tell him.
Yeah.
I need to tell him how much we love him, and that, everything will pass. We just have to be strong enough and hang on, and no matter what, his mama and I, we miss him every second of every day, and we just need him to know that he's loved, and that we will always, always fight for him. You know, a lot of times, Alan, kids seem to think, like I keep saying, that they're in this alone, and there is always someone higher up that we can go to. If you have a child that's being bullied, and you go through the proper channels with the school and they don't do anything about it, then you go through the proper channels with the state. And if they don't give you satisfaction and make it stop, then you can go all the way up to the federal level. We've even had success with the U.S. Department of Justice using some old laws, some archaic laws about human rights that they interpret very broadly, and force schools to make this stop.
Well, and then you know, I want people to know that we're here. You know,
sure.
You're here. I'm here. You know, I would go fight to my last breath for a child, and I always say it's just one. You know, I just want to see one child change their mind, and I feel better. But
yes,
you know, I certainly want to see all of them. You know, hear from us. You know, that's why I did what I did, and that's why you do what you do, I'm sure, too. It's like, I'm an adult, and I feel this way. And you know, I'm sorry that I knew that question would be hard. And, you know, I think that people have to know, you know, we're emotional beings. We're allowed to be emotional beings. You know, you and I grew up at a time where I don't think I ever saw my dad cry. I don't know if you saw your dad cry, you know. But we're allowed to feel. We're allowed to be human, and that's what makes us what we are.
Yes, sir.
And by telling people they can't be like that, or we shouldn't be like that, or you should be a big boy and, you know, fight back or take it, and, you know, we're creating a society of people who are angry, who are challenged, who are not going to be people you want to be around as an adult. And that's what I always say. Do you want your boss to be the bully kid that never learned any different? And there are plenty of them out there.
Oh, yeah.
Because they grew up to be bullies. And so, you know, what we're doing and what you're doing is so important, because the community is going to grow. You know, it is a grassroots movement, but it's growing very fast. And
it is.
I never thought I'd see the day when every day on the news we're seeing a new story. I go for Twitter. I go every day and I find that day's latest stories. And you know what? I have yet to have a day where there's not a story.
That's correct.
Story to publish. And it wasn't that way when I started in 2007, and I'm sure it wasn't that way 6 years ago for you. So we're making a difference. We are.
I believe that. You know, we've come a long way in the last 6 or 7 years, especially. I'm seeing a lot of changes. I'm seeing a lot of schools begging us to come. You know, we got to get a handle on this. We need to do something about it. We need your help. You know, I was on the road traveling and speaking at schools 340 days out of 365 last year. Mm. And it takes that kind of dedication to make a dent in this, you know. Will we ever completely stop bullying? No. But I'm going to give my damnedest to try, you know.
And if we can't stop bullying, we want to stop bullicide or suicide. We've got to tell kids that, you know, that's not the answer, you know. It's just not. That there's a life in front of them. They just don't see it yet.
I agree.
And it's hard to see it. I mean, it's hard. It's, you know, I remember being 16. I do. I remember being 13. And if we hadn't moved, Kirk, I don't know what would have happened. I honestly don't.
Yeah.
But something would have happened.
Well, you know what, Alan? every pair of ears we reach with this message is a pair of lips to help spread it. And if everybody would just do that, then pretty soon the whole world would hear it, and we could make a dent in this, and we can make it stop, and we can quit losing children and having families live the devastating nightmares that Laura and I live because their son or daughter took their own life. Just get involved.
And what you're doing is so honorable. So I know that your movement, Stand for the Silent, you're always looking for helpers. You're always looking for people. They can create a Stand for the Silent group in their community.
Sure.
So how can they get in touch with you? How can they get in touch with Stand for the Silent and start that?
The best way is to go to our website, standforthesilent.org. And if, they want to look over what it takes to start an active chapter or group in their community or in a school, they can do so off the website. All they have to do is click on the Take Action tab, and then there's going to be a little blue button that pops up and says Start a Chapter. And if they click on that, they can download and print out the instructions, and then they email us at contact@standforthesilent.org with the information about their chapter, and we approve it, and we get them up and running, and we start sending them resources. And it's all about keeping awareness in front of our kids and in front of our communities, Yep. And you had mentioned another thing about the documentary that you had mentioned. There are a couple other ones out there that are really, really good that we are involved with. We did a follow-up to the bully documentary. It was on Anderson Cooper 360, and you can just Google search this one. Just Google search AC360, The Bully Effect. And he follows up about, I think, 3 of the families that were in the original documentary, kind of a what they're doing now type deal. It's about an hour-long special that he did, and it's pretty good documentary. We have another one that's coming out soon called Hear Me Now that we are in. It looks to be very powerful. And then we're working with a producer out in L.A. right now also, and Sharon Stone, the actress. They're trying to fund a film, and it's going to be called The Principal. And I've read the script for it, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
And that one will be donated free of charge to all the schools that we visit as soon as it gets made. So
yeah, I'm following that one, and I'm part of that program too.
Awesome.
I think what they're doing is great. Yeah, making a movie and then offering it up like that.
Sure.
I'm wishing them the best of success.
You and me both.
And I can't tell you how much it meant for me to be with you on this show, because I'm the other side. To me, when I heard your story, I felt like your son. I felt like this is what I was experiencing. These were things that happened to me, and I think there's both sides of it. What if my parents were you? What if I had left them like that? And there's so many sides to this that people bring, and I've met so many great people. I'm sure you have along the road. That I think if we leave with one thing, I would love to work with you and have a vigil on the greens in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol steps. I think that we should do that. I think that we should make it very clear, just like a 1 million person march, there's a lot of us. It's not It's not just being invited to the White House for a bullying day. It's
exactly.
much bigger than that.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm hoping. So maybe that's something we can talk about offline and try to set up.
Okay.
But I would love to. And I just appreciate your candor, your honesty. People should look up YouTube and watch all your interviews. You're very candid and very honest, and that's not easy to do. It's not easy for any of us, to relive things that hurt us so badly, and to do it because we believe we can help others. And that's what we're doing. I mean, that's what you're doing. And thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Alan, at the end of the day, when we have to, Laura and I, we believe in a higher power. I'm not a deeply religious person. I have to believe that there is something after this life because I want to see my baby again.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, I have to be the best person that I can possibly be, so that I make sure that when I leave this earthly plane, that I can be back with him. And it's always at the end of the day, when we leave here, no matter what money we have, what material things we have, I think when we face whatever you believe is up there, that we're going to have to answer for our actions, how we helped others. It's not going to matter whether you drive a Mercedes or a Ferrari, or you built a huge monument or building or what. It's going to be how you treated other people, and how you cared about others. And I think that's truly what people need to start realizing, and come to the mindset that you can't take it with you.
Yep.
You truly can't. And so many people in this world are hurting and in need of various things. And, whether you believe in God or Buddha or Allah or whomever you believe in, there is something after this. And we do all have to face the music at the end of the day.
And what I always say is I'll leave it at this, with one of the saddest things that we don't know is we don't know how many people really love and care about us
until we're
gone. They're going to show up at our funeral.
Yes, sir.
We don't get to see it. And so if you make a difference now, you can at least know that those people care, that those people, you've touched people. And I think there's no amount of money, in my mind, that can replace your time and your energy to do good. And again, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for being one of the leaders in helping people with this problem of bullying and surviving a tough time. And please give your best my best to your wife. And I hope we can meet and work together, because we're definitely all in this together. And
let's make it happen.
Yeah, and I would love that. So thank you, Kirk Smalley, for your time. You can reach him at the Stand for the Silent website, Facebook, Twitter. You're everywhere, and form your own Stand for the Silent group in your community. Join us and make it happen. So, Kirk, thank you for being on the show, for being on Healthy University. It's so much appreciated.
You are more than welcome, and thank you for doing what you do, Alan.
Thank you, and you're welcome. This is Alan Eisenberg for Healthy University. Please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.